Welcome one and all to the second session of Day 3 of Faculty Development Program 2021 organized by the KIIT School of Mass Communication. This is Souptik, Garai, your moderator for this particular session. Today, we begin with a session by Dr. Manisha Pathak-Shelat, Professor at the Communication and Digital Platforms and Strategies, Chair at the Center of Development Management and Communication, CDMC, MICA. Dr. Pathak will be talking on the topic digital inclusion, why and how. So I'll invite Dr. Bidubhushan Das, the course coordinator at the School of Mass Communication and Journalism at KIIT, to welcome our resource person for this session.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good evening, esteemed speaker and all my participants. It's a great privilege to welcome Professor Manisha Pathak-Shelat, a senior professor of communication studies in our country and chair of Center for Development Management and Communication at MICA, Ahemdabad. Professor Pathak-Shelat has taught and worked as a media consultant and trainer and researcher in India, Thailand, and the US. She has a PhD in mass communication from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, USA, and in education from MS University of Baroda, India. Professor Pathak-Shelat's special interests are young people's media cultures, new media, civic engagement, transcultural citizenship, media literacy, and gender. Broadly, her research over the years has addressed the question of how ordinary individuals engage with media to experience agency, to explore identities, and to participate in social change. Her research projects include a study on online civic engagement and transcultural citizenship, an ongoing inquiry in digital youth cultures in the country, and an Academy of Finland-sponsored multi-country youth media participation project. At present, she is leading the UNICEF-MICA partnership on the India component of the Global Kids Online Study initiated by UNICEF, Office of Research Innocenti, and the London School of Economics. She has shared her research on several international platforms, and her work has been published in many reputed journals like Journal of Youth Studies, Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy, New Media and Society, Communication Inquiry, Journal of Children and Media, Media Asia, and so on. She has received a number of awards and fellowships, including the Soviet Land Nehru Award, Shastri Indo-Canadian Faculty Research Award, the Salzburg Seminar Fellowship, and Tata Fellowship for the study of contemporary India. She is also the editor of the Journal of Creative Communications, which is one of the prestigious journals from our country, published by MICA and for SAGE. She has led several capacity building programs for non-profits, various state governments, corporate sectors, and international agencies in communication and information management. Professor Pathak was also associated with us as the Board of Studies member, and her contribution as an external Board of Studies member was immense. Thank you for your contribution to the school. And when I invited Professor Pathak-Shelat for this talk, though she was busy in the afternoon, she had requested 2-3 times to have it in the morning slot. At the end, she told, no, Bidu, no need to shift and keep it in the afternoon. I'll manage. And really, we are grateful to you, ma'am. And over to you, ma'am. So, ma'am will talk on a very interesting topic, digital inclusion, why and how. So, it's very relevant and timely topic. Welcome, ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you, Bidu. Am I audible clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was so interesting that when I looked at the screen, I mean, half the screen looks like my Facebook page, because I realized that I'm connected to so many of you over Facebook, right? So, I mean, already the audience looks very familiar, and maybe thanks to digital inclusion, we can say. So when, Bidu sent me the schedule, I was like, he has placed me in a difficult position, sandwiched between two stalwarts. And it's always like, when you are the first child, like the parents are very excited and everything you do is valuable. And when you are the last child, you are pampered, right? It's always the middle one that has to really, carve a place for themselves. So yeah, being in the middle is a very interesting, challenging position. So let me say this, that, you must have heard these two terms all the time these days, diversity and inclusion. Do you agree? Do you hear them all around you? Right? And we know that whether it's a business organization or a university, diversity and inclusion are two very important values, which any organization needs to thrive. So I want to quickly ask you if you can put in the chat, some responses that when we say inclusion, like what do you mean? What comes to your mind? What is inclusion? And meanwhile, I'll just open my, yeah. So can I share my slide?
Sure, ma'am. Just give me a second. I'll just make you the co-host.
Yeah. Yes, very true. Everybody has a place on the table. Yes. Anything else? Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So anything else? I can't see the chat while I'm sharing the screen.
Dr. Saurav Gupta says being a part of one's own development.
Being part of one's own development. Okay. Being having a seat at the table. Anything else? Just one more response from anyone?
There are few more responses, including every stakeholder of the project, being included, being a part of one's own development to ensure equality, justice, and to make sure that no one is left out.
Being a part of something comes up all the time. And I was, searching for, how best to explain these two terms. And I found across some really interesting quotes on the internet. So I'm sharing some with you. So it's like they say that, some people use these two terms like interchangeably, but it's like you said that diversity is having a seat at the table. We had that response, but inclusion is having a voice. And belonging is having that voice heard. So yes, you could be invited to have a seat at the table, but then you cannot take part in the discussion. You cannot give your opinion whether the dessert is really great today or not. Then you are not included, right? Similarly, they say that it's like being invited to a party, but when you are asked to dance with everybody, then you feel included, not just by invited. And this third quote says that, it's like being invited to somebody's place, but then you always feel like you are a guest. You don't have a say there, but when you feel free to rearrange the furniture, you feel that, yes, I'm included in this family and I can do things that I like to do. So it's very important that diversity is, inviting multiple experiences and multiple perspectives. Inclusion is to make sure that these perspectives and these experiences are validated and welcomed, right? And creating a safe space and place where, people feel safe to voice these perspectives and experiences. So with that being clear, I'll for a while stop sharing. So what is interesting that, as soon as something becomes a buzzword, even if it's something very important, something very genuine, as soon as something becomes a buzzword, people start using that word left and right in all contexts. People start paying lip sympathy to it because it's necessary to, include these words in your mission statement, in your vision statement. There's a lot of tokenism, right? So, that a lot of MICA students join different corporates and ad agencies. And recently I met a former student and she said, ma'am, I had to attend a 1-month compulsory program on diversity and inclusion. So when that happens, the real wisdom, the genuine essence of the term goes missing. And the same thing is happening to digital inclusion these days. And you must have noticed that, because of the pandemic, and especially because of the online education, I mean, a lot of good things are happening like this. I don't know if I would have been able to travel to Bhubaneswar, but like I'm here, talking to you. So online education, for example, a lot of talk about, say, vaccine governance. I'm sorry, just give me a second. I think the light is playing little on my face, but I think, okay, it's okay. If it's not disturbing you, then I'll not get offended.
No, ma'am, it's okay. It's okay.
Okay, fine, yeah. So very soon it will go away, right? So that same thing has happened to digital inclusion. So when a lot of people start using it without going deeper into it, there is no clarity. Lots of myths get attached to these words, because people don't actually sit down and unpack these terms. So I thought that, very first thing that we should do today is that if digital inclusion is an important value for a country like India, especially a democratic country like India with such a vast population, and because it's so important for the nation at large and for young people, it also becomes a very important value for any university. Then I think the first thing we should do is to start with unpacking the terms, right? So what is actually digital inclusion? Again, like 1 or 2 responses.
Kindly type in your responses in the chat box, please. We have some responses. I'll just read them out. Promoting equal access and participation, enabling access to all, equitable access. I guess ma'am has lost network connection. Vidisha, can you see ma'am?
Yes, ma'am is muted.
Ma'am, you are muted.
Sorry, because I was thrown off for a second. So it's very important that a lot of us, think that once we give access to devices, cheap data, easy internet to people, we have achieved digital inclusion, right? So my argument is that is yes, I would agree with that answer and I would disagree with that answer. Because yes, that's the very first step. You have to have data, devices, services, and infrastructure. Because if you don't have this, you can't even think of, beginning your digital journey. Yes, so Dr. Tripathi's response is also very correct. Balanced approach to digital communication. And we'll see in a minute what we mean by balance. Is equitable, So, but I can still see that, we are still stopping ourselves at access and skills. Right? So we start that. That's my argument, that the journey to digital inclusion starts with access, availability, right? And we have done pretty well at that, I would say in India, looking at our population and, the resources we have, I think we've done pretty well at giving cheaper data, as much as internet availability to as many people as we can. But I would say that without digital literacy and participation, we cannot say that digital inclusion has taken place. So that brings us to a very important next word, and that is digital literacy. So again, what is digital literacy? Because we say these days that, earlier it was reading, writing, and arithmetic. These were the three important skills. If you had to be, an educated, respected citizen. Now, if you don't have digital skills, you cannot participate as a full citizen. So yes, skills are very important in digital literacy. But again, two questions, like what kind of skills and are skills enough? So a lot of people feel that, if I know how to use my phone well, download things, use apps, go online and shop, I can watch anything, Amazon Prime, Sony Live, Netflix, I'm digitally literate. Because I can do all these things, what more do I want? Some people go a step ahead and say that no, you should also be able to upload things, share things, network with people that you like to network, then you are digitally literate. So I would say that yes, skills are very important, and under skills, I would say that not only skills for consuming things, but also for connecting with the right kind of people and for collaborating and creating. So we don't stop digital literacy at consuming. So yes, Pranta, this is very important. Knowledge of identifying fake news. And it's a very important part of digital literacy. But again, what is happening, and I see this all the time these days, especially, that misinformation, fake news, and infodemic are treated as areas as if, once we do that, everybody will be digitally literate. So again, treating fake news, identifying valid sources of information, being able, very careful about what you spread and not spread, very important part of digital literacy, but again, not enough. Yes, and it's very true, critical awareness, yes. So Sandeep is very right that skills, one thing, but without critical thinking, you cannot be fully digitally literate. And this critical thinking is not only about whether, something is fake or not fake. This critical thinking goes much beyond examining your cultural biases, your structural barriers, a lot of issues like incivility on the internet, right? Abuse and trolling that is happening on the internet. So I would say that digital literacy has skills of consuming, creating, connecting, and collaborating, critical thinking, also all the necessary knowledge you need about privacy and security. Because if you do not know how to keep private what is supposed to be kept private, and if you do not know where your security can be breached, we cannot say that you are digitally literate. It's like if you don't know how to play the investment game, then you are not financially literate. You have to take care of the safety of your money. Similarly here, so privacy and security become also important areas of digital literacy. Also, netiquette, ethics, and responsibility. Because if you do not really know, how to participate in in public space. I mean, all of us are bound to have different opinions, different political ideologies, right? It does not mean that we are incivil and, we abuse those who don't think like us. Right? So always these days, because a new book of mine had just come out last month. It's called Raising a Humanist, Conscious Parenting in an Increasingly Fragmented World. And in the book, I keep talking about how do you transcend your echo chambers? Because these days, what happens is everybody loves just communicating in their own silos. I'll only connect with people who think like me, who support my views. Anybody who thinks slightly different, then I'm going to, go at that person and troll and abuse. So teaching that part of how to be civil and how to be able to carry out, engagement and deliberation online is also a very important part of digital literacy. And the last one, and in which I'm also not, that well versed yet, is, and it will be very important, I think, for our young people and children, is the whole architecture of net. Algorithms. People have already started saying that coding is a fourth art. I mean, nobody now can, get by in life without at least knowing the basics of coding. AI, what are some of the issues, what are some of the controversies? How do algorithms affect your life, your choices, what you will get to see, who you will get to hear, right? So this is also a very important part of digital literacy. So we come to two things, like only access is not enough. Only limiting digital literacy to skills, consuming skills, and identifying fake news is not enough. This whole package is really digital literacy. And then we come to really important part, and that is participation. Because I see somebody's answer here. Bidu had written that banking and finance as well. Yes, so it is an important area of participation, right? And again, participation is a very tricky word, because we always sometimes, have this tendency to glorify participation and look at it as a very unproblematic term, that, participation, it's all great. And anytime there is participation, it's all going to be nice and civil. But we always encounter that all our offline cultural biases, structural barriers, our baggage, all get into our online participation. And I know so many women and transgender friends, who have access, who have skills, who are digitally literate. They do not participate. They refuse to participate online because of the abuse they face, the trolling they face. The second, very interesting dimension of participation is the language and the public voice. Because culturally, if your language is not the acceptable language of public deliberation, you are not used to, you don't have the confidence, right? Similarly, culturally, if you have never spoken up or participated in any public deliberation, it's not that just because you have an internet, you're going to start doing it. So all these things make participation really complex. So there are all those societal norms, right, about caste, class, gender, religion. All these play a very huge role in whether, despite having access and literacy, whether someone will meaningfully participate online and whether this person will be really digitally included. So once you can, there are so many areas where you can participate, right? Civic and political engagement, as Bidu said, finance and markets and the job market, being a part of the labor market and healthcare and education, right? Intercultural dialogue. There are so many thriving spaces online where you can engage in intercultural dialogue and actually get to know people who are not like you, but whose values are still, very much like you, and they want peace and harmony in the world. So there's so many spaces out there. So once you are, the right spaces and culture of participation is there, then you can go very much and participate in all these things, online education also. So I would say that if we want to now put all of this together and if we want to think of how we should go about it, let me just pull out the slide again. Yeah. So here is like sort of a summary of everything that I said. So if you want digital inclusion, like 4 very important conditions are diversity, equity, opportunity, and safety. But for meaningful participation, you should know about what online opportunities exist, but also about risks. So knowing about risks is an important part of digital participation. So your first step is access and availability, where you need infrastructure, services, data, and devices. Then you need digital literacy, where you need all these skills, right? And then you can have full participation, and you can participate in all these areas. And to actually make this possible, everyone has to play a role. So what, we say Samaj, Sarkar and Bazaar, right? The civil society, the government and the market, the businesses. If we really want a 360-degree balanced approach, as you had said, I think in the chat, all 3 have to contribute. Maybe government can play a more important role in infrastructure and services, business with data and devices, right? But civil society organizations like libraries, community organizations, non-profits, universities have a huge role to play in the other digital literacy and participation. And none of this would happen, outside our cultural and structural context. So if we believe in this myth that if we don't change our society, if we don't change, faulty cultural norms that don't encourage diversity, cultural norms that keep people out, so they are not even invited at the table, forget about the voice. So if this society doesn't change and the society on the whole doesn't become inclusive, you can't become digitally inclusive. It's just not possible. The other important thing is that a lot of people think that, because now we have internet and it's open and democratic, everybody can speak. So even for a minute, if we think that, yes, all the marginalized people can raise their voice. But unless this voice is heard, real inclusion cannot really take place. So people can shout as much as they want, but if this voice is not heard, then we don't have much hope. And again, their universities, through their research, through their classroom, through the values they inculcate, I think have a very important role to play. Vitu, how much time do we have?
We'll continue it up to 6:15. So if you will have last 15 minutes for
Can we
Q&A.
a couple of videos?
Yeah. So
The
that's
link
that.
that you had sent. So you can let me know when I can play them.
Yeah, so, we also said about, okay, if this happens, if this really happens, then it can change lives. And we have many examples of success stories, where organizations have tried changing people's lives through bringing digital technology to them, making them digitally literate. So I have 2 videos. Of course, you will find a lot more examples. And a very recent one that came to me today is from Pakistan. The video that got the lions at the Kings. So it's about how in Pakistan, in remote communities, now people can acquire a birth certificate for a child. So it's a small example, but very important example. So I think I'll just show these two videos, which shows that if this really happens and if good work is continued, then it really changes people's lives. And then, of course, we'll be open to questions. So the first video is about a Tata Trust project, and they have a project with Google called the Internet Sathi. Can we play it?
Ma'am, if you could stop sharing, then I can start sharing my screen.
I'll stop sharing this.
Yes. Just allow me a second, please.
Yeah.
I hope my screen is visible.
Yes, yes.
Is this the video, ma'am?
This is the video, yes.
All right.
మా ఊరు నుండి పట్టణం వెళ్ళాలంటే బస్సులో 2 గంటలు పడుతుంది. సోమవారం గ్రామం మొత్తం కుటుంబంలో కలిసి ఉంటాం. మా ఊరంతా అన్నదమ్ముల్లా అక్కా చెల్లా కలిసి ఉంటాం. మామూలు స్త్రీగా అయినట్టయితే నేను ఈ 4 గోడల మధ్య ఇదే ప్రపంచం అనుకొని బ్రతుకుతున్నాను. నేర్చుకున్న తర్వాత ఈలోగానే టాటా ట్రస్ట్ వాళ్ళు గూగుల్ టీము మా గ్రామానికి ఇంటర్వ్యూకి వచ్చారు. ఇట్లా వెబ్సైట్ కొడితే ఇట్లా ఓపెన్ అవుతుంది. ఇప్పుడు నేను ఒక ఇంటర్నెట్ సాతిగా మహిళలందరినీ ఆన్లైన్లోకి తీసుకొస్తున్నాను. నేను ఇంటర్నెట్ సాతిగా సెలెక్ట్ అయిన దగ్గర ఆ రోజు నేను ఇంట్రడక్షన్ కోసం మా గ్రామంలో సైకిల్ వేసుకుని వెళ్ళాను. సైకిల్ వేసుకుని వెళ్తే ఏంటి సైకిల్ ఐస్ క్రీమ్ బండి అనేసి నేను కామెంట్ చేశారు. ఇందులో ఐస్ క్రీమ్ ఉండదు, ట్యాబ్స్ ఫోన్స్ ఉంటాయి. ఇక్కడ ప్రజలకు ఇంటర్నెట్ సౌకర్యం లేదు. మేము వాళ్ళకి ఇంటర్నెట్ సౌకర్యం కల్పిస్తున్నాము. ఈవేళ ఇంటర్నెట్లో అన్ని సౌకర్యాలు ఉన్నాయి. వాళ్ళకి తెలియపరిచేది ఎలా? వాళ్ళకి కూర్చున్నా. ఎందుకంటే గ్రామంలో అంతా నాట్ ఎడ్యుకేటెడ్ కాబట్టి అలా కాదు. మీరు కూడా చేయగలుగుతారు, మీకు ఆ సామర్థ్యం ఉంది. పడుతున్నారా ఫోటో తీయడానికి? ఒక్కసారి కనుక మహిళలకు ఇంటర్నెట్ నేర్పిస్తే వాళ్ళు చాలా ఇష్టపడతారు. బ్లౌజ్ డిజైన్ అక్కడ వచ్చింది. ఇంటర్నెట్ నేర్చుకోవడం ద్వారా ప్రపంచం మన ముందుంటుంది. గురించి ఎలా చెప్పాను అనుకున్నా? అసలు ఎక్సలెంట్, మైండ్ బ్లోయింగ్.
ఇంతకుముందు నేర్చుకోకముందు ఇలా ఉండేయన్నమాట బ్లౌజెస్. నెట్ తెలియక ముందు జస్ట్ ప్లెయిన్గా. సో నెట్లో చూడడం వల్ల మనకి తెలియని కూడా కొత్త కొత్త డిజైన్స్ తెలుస్తాయి అన్నమాట. ఇక్కడ విలేజ్ కాబట్టి అంతకుముందు వాళ్ళకి తెలియదు. అంటే ఇంతకుముందు బ్లౌజ్కి వచ్చేసి 100 మాత్రమే వచ్చాయి మేడం. ఇలా నేను నెట్లో చూసి నేర్చుకోవడం డిజైన్స్ చేయడం వల్ల 300 వరకు వస్తున్నాయి. ఇవాళ అంటే పిల్లలకి కొంచెం ఇంతకుముందు కొంచెం ఇబ్బంది అయ్యేది. సో ఫీజెస్ మంత్లీ కట్టడానికి ఇబ్బంది అయ్యేది. ఇప్పుడు ఎవ్రీ మంత్ ఫీజు పే చేయగలుగుతున్నాను అనమాట.
ఒక మహిళ ఇంటర్నెట్ నేర్చుకోవడం ద్వారా తనకు తన చుట్టుప్రక్కల వాళ్ళకు ఎంతో ఉపయోగం. మహిళ గృహ అవసరాలకు ఉపయోగపడుతుంది. కొత్త వ్యవసాయ పద్ధతులు తెలుసుకున్నటకు ఉపయోగపడుతుంది. ఇంటర్నెట్ని మహిళలు పిల్లలకు విద్య నేర్పించుటకు, పశువుల సంరక్షణకు ఉపయోగించుకుంటున్నారు. అట్లనేసి నేర్చుకున్న ప్రతి ఒక్కరూ మరొకరికి చెప్తా ఉంటే అలాగా విలేజ్ బాగుపడుతుందని నా ఆలోచన, నా ఆశ కూడా.
Okay, and then we have the other video, which is a project called CGNet Swara. So it uses voice technology to encourage citizen journalism. and they work in deep tribal areas.
Can people tell their own stories? Can we not wait for a journalist to arrive? Can media give access to the last person of our society? My name is Shubhranshu Chaudhary. I am a journalist, but from last 10 years I am part of an experiment. We are trying to see, with the help of new technology, can we democratize journalism, where the last person will have equal right to be heard. So we call it the media dark zone. 100 million indigenous people live in India, and they have no voice. There's no newspaper, no radio, no TV in their languages, and they are the poorest of the poor people from any social indication in India. In these areas, internet penetration is less than 1%. So it does not reach majority of people. Then we started looking at mobile phone. Anybody and everybody who has a story, who wants to tell anything, share anything, will pick up his or her phone and tell her story in her own language, calling the computer in the middle. So a newsroom is not one newsroom, it's mobile newsroom. So you can be sitting anywhere, you only need to have access to internet. So we hear that, we okay it, it goes to a website, and with that website it also goes to lots of people on social media, on email lists. We go from market to market, we go from village to village. And we do this drama, we do this puppet show, we do this dance and ask questions. This is a problem. You have a problem, but it is not coming on the mainstream media, it's not coming on TV. What do you think we can do? So that is our classroom. This is a new way of teaching journalism to new journalists whom we don't call journalists, because citizens should tell their own stories.
अभी हम पंडरिया ब्लॉक के सिंदूर खार पंचायत के आश्रित गांव बांगर में हैं। ये दोनों स्कूल में हैंड पंप नहीं था, बच्चे लोग नाला का पानी पीते थे। इसके लिए सीडीनेट में 2013 में हम संदेश दिए थे, तो और फिर यहाँ हैंड पंप खुदाया है। हैंड पंप आने से नाला का पानी नहीं पीते, और अब जो बीमारी होता था नाला का पानी पीने से, वो बीमारी नहीं हो रहा है। अब घर के पास इनको पानी उपलब्ध हो जाता है, साफ पीने का पानी।
Getting one hand pump working, getting electricity, getting a teacher is making huge impacts in these lives. You know, it may not be a rocket science or very fashionable as far as technology goes, but the impact it is having is revolutionary.
Yeah, thank you. So we can stop sharing, and so that was it. There are any questions?
Kindly drop in your questions in the chat box, or you may raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask directly to me. Ma'am, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
To begin with. Ma'am, so of course the online platform, the internet does provide us to give out our voices right out there. But do you think there is also a possibility of, kind of following the dominant voice and maybe losing one's indigenous way of thinking and identity as a result? When I'm just saying this because I'll just give one little example from one of my experiences that, when I travel to some of the rural belts, per se, when I see them celebrating, let's say, about some incident, about some occasion, the dominant voice, the kind of music that plays on their speakers per se, or even the kind of songs that they hum, sing, is somehow kind of probably on the opposite direction to their own indigenous cultures for that matter. So how do we place that into perspective?
I think that's a very interesting question. And I would say it's not new about internet. When we started having mass media, and they started taking over the indigenous media, it started don't you think it started with radio? It started with television. It started with Bollywood movies, right? So yeah, it's not unique to internet, but there is this possibility. But there is also, we have, across the world seen that however much we say that, there is globalization, it's more what we call, localization. So local elements always survive. We might, mix them up with global influences, but we don't completely abandon who we are and, become somebody else. So yes, hybridity very much, localization very much, will not completely lose it, but there would be, I think, something, what they say, a third possibility might emerge. This is what my observations so far say. And then of course, I've also seen that with more and more globalization and mass media, there is a conscious effort also in all the communities. You want to preserve what you have. So those efforts also are going on. So we have to just make sure that those efforts survive. Yeah? And then we also use the internet to educate our young people and the world about the rich heritage we have, because that is also quite possible. There is a very interesting community called Global Voices Online, where, people from so many different countries tell their own stories about their own cultures, because we've always felt that most of the cultures of the world, other cultures get to see through the dominant Western lens because they tell everybody else's stories. So when we have internet spaces where you can tell your own stories in your own way, I think that also will, have some kind of an impact.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your answer. We have Dr. Prantapatik Patnaik raising his hand. You may unmute yourself, sir. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, thank you. Hello, ma'am. Nice to listen to you. And watching these videos made me recall how I used to watch this video volunteers, and I used to tell my students, like, we need to do something like that. So the video volunteers was coming to my mind. And thankfully, right now I'm working on how Dalits are using the new media. So when we look into this aspect of digital inclusion, so I could relate much to your talk, and it was quite enlightening for me. And I would like to share one thing over here, and maybe you can uh, guide in that way, like how to go about it. For example, we are looking into the website called as Dalit Dastak. So in Dalit Dastak, we have all the voices of the Dalits coming in between. And I was seeing also the videos and then the comments that comes in and how there is a trolling that goes on. And at the same time, what I found very strange is the voice of the Dalit woman that is missing in this digital space. So as you were saying that this participation has to be problematized. So I could link to that, like even if Dalits have got this access and they are participating, even if there is a section of Dalits again who are unable to participate in this Dalit Dastak channel. So how it can be made much more inclusive uh, for this Dalit District channel, or how can the Dalit women voices be listened to or heard?
Yes, so yeah, I think very important point. And as I said, only if in a real society, when the women's position change, it will change on the internet. So there has to be conscious efforts in educating women, giving them access, giving them the confidence to develop their public voice, because that also needs some kind of training, right? If you've never had developed a public voice, you find it difficult to speak out. So though if you can, do those kind of workshops, as like, through this kind of programs like Internet Sati, you can actually encourage women to do so. So that reminded me, recently I was reading this book by Sunita Deshpande. She's a Maharashtrian author, very famous Maharashtrian, author, Pulat Deshpande's wife. And she talks about this, and she says that she has this question for Dalit activists, that what you are complaining about, what the other sections are doing to you, you're doing the same thing to your women. And why can't you see that? Right? So why can't you see that you are behaving the same way towards your women? So it's a very important, I think, thing to work on.
Next, we have a question by Debarati Dhar. Ma'am, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you, Manisha ma'am, for such an insightful session on digital inclusion. Taking a cue from that, I would like to know how can we promote the engagement of older adults in the digital world? Like, in what ways can we promote their inclusion and well-being of the older person in the digital world?
People, yes. So what is heartening that I see in many families, the grandchildren are already doing that job of getting older people online. But as we are doing with other marginalized groups, like the Dalit or rural women, I think we need special efforts for older people, because it helps so much in their well-being. And with older people, we also need special efforts in privacy and security training, because there's also a very, very much higher chance of, they're being duped by people who are on lookout for people who are vulnerable. So I think spatial workshops, courses, child to grandparent kind of programs in schools, that could be really important. But I have seen my mother being active on the internet, and I've seen that how much it really helps in their well-being, being connected, knowing new things, participating in say groups. So Debarati, I agree, it's a very important area of work in digital inclusion. And few people realize that, so good for pointing that out.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. This was a part of my thesis. I did my thesis on this, so that is why I wanted to, know your opinion about this, because this section is really vulnerable.
And it's a completely ignored section, I would say.
Yes, absolutely. Because we talk about new media and talk about the youth, and both are young. I mean, new media is young as well as the youth. We never talk about the older people in that sense.
No, very important.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next, we have a question by Dr. Vidubhushan Das.
It was a great presentation, ma'am. I have one question relating to the agencies. If you look at that, most of the time we teach these cases as part of communication for social change or development, whether the CGNet Swara or Grambani or Dalit Camera or even ITC's e-Chopal. So there are many such cases, not many, but there are few cases either led by civil society agencies or market agencies. But is it enough for a country like India? And I think where the state intervention is very important for digital inclusion
Yes.
than these small cases.
Yes.
And what will be your comment on it?
Absolutely agree with you. So, scaling up is a very important area for anything to have a larger impact. And scaling up has very interesting two dimensions, that it is important to scale up what is successful, but it is important to scale up in such a way that you don't lose the sight of your context. Because what has worked with CGNet Swara, might not work in other states in the same way, right? So being context sensitive, I think it's very important that we tailor this to our, participants' needs, and without state support. You're right that without state support and the right policies, because see, when it comes to policies, state plays a very important role. So even for policies, state support is very important. And what usually happens that such kind of experiments remain experiments. They are great, but they just remain restricted to those little pockets. Yeah, of course, Tata Trust and Google have more resources, and it's a pan-India project for them. So there are larger projects also. So I think a public-private partnership here is very, very important. I would say multi-sectoral partnership, business, the state, and civil society, like coming together. That is the way.
If any of the participants have any question, you may raise your hand.
In fact, there are two distinguished participants in the list. So even we may request them if they have to say something. Professor Sandeep Mupidi has already joined, and Professor Mohammad Saidullah is also there with us. If they wish to share something, it will be great.
Well, this is Sandeep. Thanks, Dr. Manisha Shelat, for calling us veterans and stalwarts, but I see us as the sort of the beginning show and the end show for the star of the evening, which is you. So, I really logged in because I wanted to listen to your talk on digital inclusion. You've been doing some fabulous work, and I really enjoyed the presentation. But in terms of the two, I do agree with the some of the questions that were raised, which was this whole, I agree with bringing the internet to the villages and things like that. I have my reservations about Google being part of it because it's also about spreading the Google web into areas that are not part of the Google monopoly in a lot of ways. So, which is where I think your topic is more important in terms of digital inclusion, because the part that needs to be played up is the critical awareness and the conscientization that needs to happen. And equip people. Like I like empowering people with new knowledge and new technologies, and bringing them the access and the participation. But I wish it also came with some kind of a warning to watch out for being caught in that trap. So, I can keep talking about it, but I just want to congratulate you on a good talk, and I'm glad I logged in.
Not more, I didn't have much time to touch upon that whole aspect, of internet, because when internet came into this, it had come with very different aspirations and it just got hijacked by the business. And I think that it should become an important part of our digital literacy training, so that people don't follow this trap. This is a very relation, because we often want and their resources. We don't feel like what we are doing. lives. And so, especially, I know that there are media people and journalism. We have to do that watchdog role. I think it's really important. Thank you, Sandeep. I'm so glad you are here. Nice to see you.
Professor Shahidullah is there from University of Chittagong. So may I request
Yes,
Professor
yes. Thank you very much. And I'm really delighted to listen to Manisha's speech. I do really enjoy the speech altogether. And I'm really glad.
Sir, you are muted.
Yes, Dr. Vidhu raised in context of the India or countries like ours, where we can consider the intervention of the state context of the inclusion of the people in ICT or through ICTs is very important. However, my concern is that the public partnership is very dangerous test for the digital inclusion, as I have seen in my research in different times in Bangladesh. Because in the poor country or the countries like ours, where the state has some sort of responsibility to pick the people who are living in the marginal point, they need to make inclusion through a state intervention. But the purpose of the private institution is like profit. So it's very difficult whenever the private intervention just occurred in the countries, then the poor people need to pay money for having the service. And the state become retreated in context of providing service free or the people who needs really this kind of service. So the imposition of this kind of private entrepreneur in context of the ICT inclusion is really a dangerous test, and it's a challenge to the state that the state should retreat from providing the support for the people who are living at the very marginal or rural level. I think that's the point I need to consider during the digital inclusion too. Thank you, Professor Manisha.
Yeah, thank you. So do you recommend that it should be completely in the hands of state?
Not really. I mean, the state has some sort of key roles. They need to play some sort of key roles whenever they need to. They intend to include the people who are living at the marginal state, not the city, because most of the people who are living at the rural level or the rural areas, they have very limited scope to have the opportunity in inclusion through the private sector. So state has some sort of responsibility to go there. The state need not to concentrate on the issues only the cities area, rather they need to go further to include the people who are really, really beyond the purview of the ICT facilities. That's my point, nothing else.
No, I agree. It's slightly tricky. I was traveling in Raigad area, where Swadesh Foundation does a lot of work, and it's again CSR, from Ronnie Sriwala. So it's complex, but they say that there was a small village that we visited. It was on top of the hill, and there were 7 families. And for 3 generations, they did not have water. So we had to march down like miles downward and climb up. And no government agency was really interested. They said, doing this for 7 people, like how many patches? There's so many factors,
I think it's the audio is. May I request Saidullah sir to mute yourself, so maybe audio clarity will be there. Said, yeah. Yes, yes.
So, right.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your enlightening talk. It was quite a topic to ponder over. So now I would request Assistant Professor at School of Mass Communication, Ms. Ruby Nanda, to extend a vote of thanks for this session.
Thank you so much. as ma'am has rightly pointed out, that the journey to digital inclusion starts from access, and in India we have just started that. So there are so many dimensions which needs to be worked on, and universities actually have a very important part to play in it. So thank you so much, ma'am, for giving us such a pertinent topic to think on. I would heartily thank Professor Manisha Pathak-Shelat to be part of our FDP. This is the third day of our FDP, and I would also like to thank our founder, Sir Dr. Achyut Samant, for and also our CEO, Sir Professor Himanshu Shekhar Khatwa, Sir, for allowing us to bring in such eminent people who give us so much to think about. I would also thank our course coordinator, Bidu Bhushan Das, and also all the participants who are here being part of this FDP. Thank you so much.